After my husband passed away, my son said, "Mom, you shouldn't be living alone in such a big house." I thought Navla that hat, maybe he'd finally grown a conscience. That he wanted to be here, to look after me. But once he moved in with his wife and kid, the truth came out fast. He started by digging through my financial records, flipping through my checkbook, then drafted agreements without me, arranged quiet meetings with property agents. That's when it hit me. They weren't here for me. They were here for the house under my feet, and the pension I earned month after month. But here's what they forgot. This house still bears my name, and I've never been the kind of woman anyone could corner. It had been 1 week since David passed. The morning was overcast, and the wind whispered through the pines outside like it was mourning something too. I sat in the rocking chair in our living room, holding his favorite mug ceramic, navy blue, a chip on the rim. It was filled with the black coffee I brewed that morning, bitter enough to echo the weight in my chest. The house was utterly still. Only the old pendulum clock on the wall broke the silence, ticking heavily, each beat a dull reminder. You're alone now. We moved to this coastal town 30 years ago, paid off the mortgage together, planted the maple tree out back. David used to say, when we were old, we'd sit on the porch swing and watch the leaves go from green to red, then fall. He said he loved autumn because it was when people were quietest inside. I used to tease him for being sentimental. But now, I think he always knew there might come a day when I'd be the one sitting there alone, saying nothing, just listening to the wind. Rosa came by. She never rings, the bell just slips through the back door like a whisper, as if not to startle the silence. "Have you eaten?" she asked, her voice a little tight as she rifled through the fridge. I waved her off. "I'm fine. Had some coffee this morning." She stood there for a moment, then gently closed the fridge door and walked over to sit beside me. "Helen," she said, her voice firm but kind. "I know you're trying to be strong, but you don't have to bottle all this up. David's gone, but you're still here. You still have a life. You've gone too long without asking yourself what that life should look like." I managed a small smile. I thought I was ready, Rosa. These past few years, every day felt like waiting for the moment David would close his eyes. And when it finally happened, it was like I got left behind. I don't know where to go from here. She took my hand, cold at the knuckles but steady. "You carried him for a long time. Now it's time to carry yourself." I didn't answer, but I knew she was right. David had been sick for 6 years. The worst of it, I barely left this house. I cared for him day and night, not out of duty, out of love. I knew he needed me just like I once needed him. Our son Eric always said he was too busy with work. He visited twice a year, at most. They'd stay for 2 nights, offer a tired "Mom, you've done so much," and then vanish again. The night David died, he squeezed my hand in the hospital one last time. His eyes were so clear, I almost thought he'd turned young again. "Helen," he whispered, "promise me you'll live well after I'm gone. Live for yourself." That sentence has echoed in my mind ever since, like the ticking clock on the wall, slow, steady, and sharp enough to make your chest ache. Rosa gave my shoulder a soft pat before heading out. "I'll drop by this afternoon," she said, "and I'll bring some maple pie." She had barely stepped off the porch when she paused, her brow furrowing. "That car out front, isn't that Eric's?" I didn't even have time to answer. The doorbell rang. That slow, falsely cheerful press of the bell lit was Melissa. I got up and opened the door. There was Eric, standing on the porch in a suit, jacket slung over his arm, one hand on the handle of a rolling suitcase. Melissa stood beside him, wearing a t-shirt that read "Family First," snapping a selfie with my porch in the background, her smile wide and sweet. Behind them was Ethan, eyes glued to his phone, earbuds in, his backpack covered in neon gaming stickers. "Mom," Eric said, reaching out to me with a relaxed grin, "we've been thinking, and we decided to move in with you for a while." Melissa lowered her phone and switched on a softer tone. "You've been so lonely. We thought, now more than ever, what you need is family around." Ethan chimed in, "Grandma, can I turn your basement into a game room? I promise I won't be loud." I stood frozen, hands still on the doorknob, unable to find words. They stepped past me like it was scripted, dragging their luggage across the hardwood floor with a screech, as if they already lived here. Eric gave my shoulder a friendly pat. "Dad's gone, Mom. It's just us now. We've got to take care of each other. You don't need to do this alone." I nodded, and my eyes welled up, but not because of what he said. Because I saw Melissa's t-shirt. I'd seen it on her social media dozens of times. She wore it in all her heartwarming family content, videos her go-to costume for gaining likes and sympathy. Now she was fiddling with her phone again, angling it to capture just the right shot of her, with the edge of my home in the frame. I didn't know why, but a small unease crept into me. Like when you sit down and notice the rug beneath your feet has wrinkled just enough to make you stumble if you forget it's there. The past few days, the house had become unexpectedly lively. From the kitchen came the clatter of pots and pans. Melissa, in her gray hoodie printed with mom life, whisked eggs while live streaming from her phone, chirping about a 3-generation breakfast in the making. Her voice pierced the mic with exaggerated enthusiasm, her smile beaming like she'd been cast as the ambassador of domestic bliss. I stood at the edge of the dining room, watching Eric fumble with the coffee machine, pressing the wrong button and flooding the counter. He shrugged with a sheepish grin. Mom, why does this thing always break when I touch it? I gave a faint smile and stepped forward to wipe the mess. You hit the cleaning button. That's not how you brew coffee. He blinked innocently. See, that's why we need you. I didn't respond. I just tossed the damp rag into the laundry basket. After recording her clip, Melissa spun the camera toward the living room and declared, "This is what I mean by the warmth of family. A home filled with parents' memories and our new life." That line hit me hard. She said our new life, not Helen's life we came to share. At breakfast, the table was buzzing. Ethan sat on the wooden bench, shoving toast into his mouth while glued to a live stream on his tablet. He'd grown overly polite with me lately, saying, "Grandma, can you pass the juice?" but never lifting his eyes from the screen. His fingers swiped nonstop, his face blank. "Grandma, what's your Wi-Fi password? My game kept lagging last night," he muttered, shooting me a quick glance, his tone already tinged with impatience. I murmured the password. He typed it in without looking up. "No thank you." After breakfast, as I was doing the dishes, I overheard Melissa whispering to Ethan. The water running in the sink nearly drowned it out, but I caught enough. "Be on your best behavior these few days. Okay, don't get on Grandma's nerves. If you're good, Mommy will buy you that laptop you wanted." Ethan lit up. "Really? The Alienware one?" "Of course," she chuckled, tapping his forehead. "As long as you act like a well-behaved young man." Standing at the sink, rinsing plates, I felt a strange ripple inside. They'd said they moved in because they were worried I'd be lonely, because money was tight. But now Melissa was casually promising a computer that costs over $2,000. If it was Eric footing the bill, that made even less sense. I had borrowed money from David last year, supposedly to catch up on his car payments. I dried my hands and stepped into the living room. Melissa was uploading breakfast photos to her channel. The caption read, "Mom's kitchen is back. A joyful morning with 3 generations under one roof." I stared at the photo. My face was barely visible at the edge of the frame, blurred like I was just part of the background decor. That afternoon, Rosa stopped by with a homemade maple pie. She walked in and immediately raised an eyebrow. "What's going on in here?" I thought I wandered into a reality show. I chuckled. "They're documenting family life. That's the trend now, real life, unfiltered." Rosa set the pie on the table. "Real, Helen, your house looks like a soundstage. You're the lead, sure, but nobody gave you a script." I stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "They seem happy. Ethan's been calling me grandma again, which is rare." She sliced into the pie, slowly, deliberately. "Since when is your son so devoted? Do you remember when David was in the hospital a couple of years ago? Eric said he was too busy and never even showed up once." I nodded, smiling faintly. "I remember. I kept telling myself maybe he just didn't know how to deal with seeing his dad like that." Rosa shook her head. "That's a cop-out. He's always only dealt with one person himself." I didn't argue, because I couldn't. Deep down, I hadn't believed my own excuses either. Every time something happened with David, it was me who made the calls, filled the prescriptions, waited through the nights. Eric always had a reason: travel, meetings, taking Ethan to summer camp. And still, I kept offering them benefit of the doubt, clinging to whatever shreds of explanation I could find. Rosa looked at me, her tone softening. "You've been a good wife, a good mom. But Helen, you can't keep using love as a blindfold. Be careful. Not every smiling face is a kind one." I dropped my eyes to the maple pie. The syrup was slowly sliding over the crust's edge, like time leaking out of the corners. I wanted to say I was fine, that I could handle it, but the lump in my throat stopped me. That night, I sat in my room with David's old notebook, the one he used now, and then during his illness to jot down thoughts. On the first page, he had written, "If I'm ever gone, Helen needs to sleep. No more staying up past midnight in the kitchen prepping my meds." I closed the notebook. My eyes stung. From upstairs came a burst of excitement. Ethan had probably just won another online match. Melissa laughed from the guest room. "Babe, come read this comment, it's hilarious." The TV in the living room blared with Eric's game. The announcer's voice shook the wall like a minor earthquake. I switched off my bedside lamp, lay back, and stared at the ceiling. Everything was so loud. And yet, I'd never felt this alone. I never imagined that in my own home. I'd start asking for permission before doing anything. That morning, I woke up early and decided to make some oatmeal. But the pot was missing. Melissa had reorganized the kitchen the night before, something about streamlining storage. After searching for a while, I finally found the old pot shoved into a bottom cabinet beneath the dishwasher, nearly buried behind a line of matching glass bowls she'd neatly arranged. As I stood up, I remembered David's old radio, the one that always sat on the low cabinet in the dining room. He used to love listening to Jazz FM while reading the paper. Said it sounded like life settling in. But when I turned to look, the cabinet was empty. I walked into the living room and asked, "Melissa, have you seen a black radio? The one with the silver knob?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, that old thing. I tossed it at the recycling center outside. It was dusty and ugly, and I didn't want it showing up in my video backgrounds." I froze, my throat tightening. It wasn't about the value. That radio had been on almost every day in David's last few years. Its hum was like the house itself was still breathing. Some nights, when I couldn't sleep, I'd sneak out and turn it on just to hear that familiar sound, just to pretend he was still in the next room. And now, without a word, she'd thrown it away. I rushed to the curbside bins, hoping to find it. I sifted through everything, but it was gone. It felt like something had been carved out of my chest. As usual, breakfast was eaten by the three of them, and I cleaned up afterward. I was just sitting down to eat my own now lukewarm bowl of oatmeal when Ethan threw the remote onto the couch and shouted, "Grandma, can you stop chewing so loud while you eat?" I blinked, looking over at him. He was slouched on the sofa, busy with the brand new gaming console he'd gotten. Melissa had ordered it online just days earlier in my credit card. Eric had laughed and said, "A reward for our sweet champion son." Not one of them had said thank you. I didn't respond. I just picked up my bowl and went to my room. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard them casually discussing what takeout to order for lunch. That afternoon, I planned to tidy up the study. But when I opened the door, I hardly recognized the space. Half the bookshelves were cleared out. In their place were Ethan's trophies, toys, a Bluetooth speaker, and an entire row of video game cases. The drawer where I used to keep my journals and novels had been broken into, now stuffed with comic books and 2 game controllers. "How did you get in here?" My voice came out sharper than I meant. Ethan didn't even look away from his game. "Didn't you say I could use the room?" "I said you could borrow it, not turn it into your personal arcade." He shrugged. "Mom and Dad said no one was using it anyway. Might as well give me my own space." I stood there, feeling like an outsider. The hallway light cast a long, stretched shadow of me across the carpet, blurry and thin, just like my place in this home. At dinner, Melissa brought up a great idea. She said, "Helen, I looked into Ethan's school district yesterday. If we moved near the lake, it'd be only 5 minutes from one of the best schools. Plus, property values there keep going up." Eric jumped in. "Yeah." We looked at the numbers. Prices in that area rise fast. If you were open to selling this house, we could use that equity to put down a deposit somewhere better. I set down my knife and fork, keeping my tone as steady as I could. "And where would you be buying?" Melissa smiled sweetly. "Together, of course. Wouldn't a 3-generation household feel more grounded?" I stared at her, saying nothing. Eric added, "Besides, this house is pretty old. Repairs aren't cheap. Remember that leak in the roof last storm? You can't manage that on your own forever. We'd get something with a yard." Melissa said, taking a bite of salmon. "You'd have your own suite, a whole new security system. And with your fixed income, the mortgage wouldn't be too heavy. Your quality of life would actually improve." They said it so casually, like it was a smart investment plan. But I saw it clearly now. They wanted the house, my pension, my quiet compliance. They wanted me to step off the stage, so they could rewrite the script of this home. After dinner, I sat in the backyard holding David's old sun hat. He used to come out at this time, digging around the maple tree, saying, "When Ethan starts middle school, we'll throw a birthday party under this tree." The party never happened. No one even mentioned that tree anymore. Later, I went upstairs to find our old utility bills. I headed for the spare room where I used to keep family files and winter coats. Melissa had cleared it out completely. She said she wanted to turn it into a peaceful yoga space. I opened the old wall cabinet and found a pink folder at the very bottom, wedged under a yoga mat. I figured it was hers. But when I opened it, I froze. Inside were real estate appraisals and 2 pages of mortgage consultation reports. One line made my blood run cold. Recommended sale price, 95 of market value for quick turnover. Suitable for joint ownership or inheritance scenarios. It was signed by a real estate agent I'd never heard of. The notes section read, "Homeowner highly cooperative. Projected close within 90 days. My name was at the top of the page. The signature line was blank. I tucked the papers back into the folder and slid it under a pile of sweaters, hiding it deep in the back of the closet. As I walked out of the garage, I saw Melissa in the yard, chatting on the phone. Her voice was light, breezy. "Yeah, Eric's mom still lives here, but she's moving to assisted living soon. We're taking over the place. The layout's great." I backed into the house and quietly shut the door. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The doubt I'd been pushing away now rang like a siren in my mind. Eric hadn't come home to care for me. They came to take over. When I came back from the grocery store the other day, the house was unusually quiet. But the moment I stepped into the living room, I had the strange feeling I'd walked into someone else's home. The walls where David and I had once hung our photos, including the one from our 30th anniversary, were bare. In their place was a grayscale abstract painting, the kind you'd see staged in an IKEA showroom, slick, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion. The throw pillows on the couch had all been swapped out for beige and dusty blue ones. The old blanket was gone, replaced with a brand new wool throw that still had its retail tag dangling. Melissa stood in the corner, filming a wide-angle video on her phone, repositioning a diffuser bottle on the coffee table as she narrated. "Today I'm showing you guys our new layout, modern with a touch of understated luxury. We're starting this next phase of life with a fresh vibe." She noticed me at the door, paused for a beat, then plastered on that well-rehearsed sugary smile. "Helen, you're back. We didn't change much, just optimize the space a little. See how much more light comes in. The room feels so much bigger now." I scanned the room. My old armchair was gone, the one David used to sit in while listening to the radio, reading the paper, or sometimes dozing off. The wood on the arms had worn smooth over the years, and the cushions still bore the tiny tooth marks from our late dog, Cheddar. "What about the chair?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Oh, that," Melissa chirped. "It's in storage now. Too old, too bulky. It didn't really work with the look we're going for in the listing photos." I stood there, feeling like a guest who'd accidentally walked into the wrong open house, unsure of which door I was still allowed to open. She'd said it so casually, but I heard her loud and clear. "Listing." I didn't ask who planned to sell the house. I didn't ask if I was even part of that decision. I just quietly sat down and stared at the coffee table. Something, I realized, was being taken from me piece by piece. A few days later, I went to my room to find David's old toolbox. I needed to change a light bulb. I dug through the cabinets, but it wasn't where I remembered. I reached farther back and noticed several cardboard boxes I used to store winter clothes had been moved. One lid was ajar. I was sure no one had touched those boxes in years. I knelt down and opened one. On top were a few old ledgers. Underneath them, bank envelopes, my social security statements, even some printed emails about pension adjustments. My fingers froze on the page. Someone had gone through them. And not just casually, they were res-tacked in chronological order by deposit date. That wasn't how I filed things. I remembered stuffing them all haphazardly into the bottom of the box. Now they looked reviewed. That night, too restless to sleep, I threw on David's old knit cardigan and stepped out for a walk. The night air was crisp, biting against my ears. I passed the small-town post office at the corner and spotted Rosa walking her old Labrador, moving slow but steady. She saw me from a distance and furrowed her brows. "Helen, you can't sleep either. You look like your mind's somewhere else." I forced a smile. "Sleep's been hard lately." She didn't respond, just gave my hand a gentle pat. We walked together in silence for a block or two. the streetlights casting soft shadows on the asphalt. After a few minutes, I finally said, "Do you remember that lawyer you mentioned, Naomi Vega?" She blinked, then nodded. "Of course. She's my cousin's daughter. Very sharp. She's the deputy director at the Women's Legal Advocacy Center downtown. I think I might need her number." She looked at me, didn't ask a thing, just reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled slip of paper. "I should have given you this sooner." My fingers trembled as I took it. Maybe it was the cold. Or maybe it was because for the first time, I was actually about to do something. She looked at me and said gently, "You don't have to wait until someone pushes you off the cliff to decide where you want to stand." I nodded, my throat tightening. It was like that one sentence had loosened the tightest knot inside my chest. I folded the note and tucked it deep into my pocket. This house still stood, but it no longer felt like mine. I didn't know yet what I'd have to face. But one thing was certain. It was time for me to move back into this home before they pushed me all the way out. That day, I went to the community library and checked out a book on gardening. Not because I truly wanted to plant anything, but because I needed an excuse to get out of the house. The air inside had grown heavy lately, like someone had quietly shut off all ventilation and installed an invisible camera to monitor when I'd stopped fitting in. At 2:30, I came home carrying the canvas bag with my books. The moment I opened the front door, I was hit by the overpowering scent of Melissa's favorite candle, the one she always lit during her live streams. As I took off my shoes, I heard an unfamiliar female voice coming from the living room. "Oh, the lighting is just perfect here, especially with those south-facing windows in the afternoon. If the walls were repainted in a soft cream tone, that would be ideal. And the kitchen has potential some cabinet door updates. And this place is great for family buyers." I froze. Before I even stepped in, I heard Melissa's voice floating out casually. "We're hoping to move quickly. My mother-in-law is getting older, and two-story living just isn't practical for her anymore. She's even scared to go upstairs at night." I stopped mid-step. The book bag nearly slipped from my hand. In the living room sat a woman in a gray blazer, tapping through real estate listings on her tablet with practiced ease. On the coffee table was a printed draft of a listing proposal. Eric stood nearby, wearing the pale blue button-up he only ever put on for business meetings. Melissa turned and spotted me, her expression flashing that telltale, "You weren't supposed to walk in on this" look, before snapping into a sugary smile. "Oh hey, Helen, you're back," she said, waving a hand as if this were all completely casual. "This is Diana, a realtor we're consulting with. She was just in the area and popped by to give us some structural ideas. No big decisions yet." Diana stood up with a professional smile. "Hello, Mrs. Monroe. I heard you've lived here a long time. This house has incredible potential. It's the kind of layout that does very well on the market." I didn't shake the hand she extended. "I don't recall authorizing any listing consultations as the homeowner," I said evenly, not loud, but clear enough to still the room for a beat. Eric coughed. "Mom, we're just exploring. We're not actually selling. It's just, with the current market, if you ever wanted to move out, or..." "I never said I wanted to move out," I said calmly, looking straight at him. "And I never said I can't manage stairs." Melissa tugged on his sleeve. "Honey, don't get defensive. Mom's probably just caught off guard. We're not doing anything yet, just being proactive." I looked around. The abstract painting still hung on the wall. None of my photos had returned to their spots. The listing proposal had 4 pages. The top one read, "Estimated closing time, within 90 days. "Whose house is this?" I asked. No one answered. Eric met my eyes briefly, his mouth drawn tight. I slowly placed the book bag on the chair and sat down, folding my hands in my lap as I stared at the proposal. "Did you go through my ledgers, my bank statements too? Maybe cross-reference my Social Security income and pension deposits?" Melissa's smile tightened. "Helen, that's not what this is about. We're just trying to help you manage everything in a more modern, future-forward way." Just then, the doorbell rang. I got up and opened the door. It was Rosa. She raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say you'd be out all day?" "I came back early," I said softly. She leaned slightly to peek past me. Her eyes met Eric. She looked away, uncomfortable. "Oh, guests," she said, stepping inside. "What a coincidence. I actually brought over a few of our garden designs. I thought Helen might like to see what we submitted for the city exhibit last year." She winked at me. "You have time to take a look?" I nodded. "Of course." Then I turned to Diana. I have no intention of selling this home. Not now. Not in the foreseeable future. And if you require an official confirmation of that, I'd be happy to have my attorney send over a formal letter. Diana awkwardly gathered her paperwork. I completely understand. No problem at all. Melissa shot me a glare so sharp it nearly cracked. Eric leaned in to whisper something to her. I couldn't hear what it was. I didn't care anymore. Rosa and I walked into the dining room. Behind us, I heard the shuffle of Diana packing up, the crinkle of paper being slid back into folders, the click of her heels retreating. Once we heard the front door shut with a definitive thud. Rosa finally spoke. I figured as much. I didn't answer. Just unzipped my book bag and laid the fresh gardening guide on the table. She exhaled, slow and steady. So what's the plan, Helen? Are you going to wait for them to take the keys from your hands, or are you going to change the locks first? I didn't say a word, but my heart was already answering her. I always thought meeting a lawyer would feel cold and impersonal. But the moment I sat down in Naomi Vega's office, saw her adjusting her round glasses while gently explaining a medical trust to an elderly woman in a voice soft as linen, I felt an unexpected urge to cry. Mrs. Monroe, please come in, she said with a warm, steady smile. Rosa's told me a bit about you. I nodded, gripping the printed property appraisal and a few photocopies of my financial records so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Naomi listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't respond right away. She stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a set of documents. First, you need to know this house is entirely in your name. Unless you sign off voluntarily, no one has any legal right to make decisions about it. She paused, her voice gentle but firm. But moral lines aren't enough. What we need is enforceable paperwork. She gave me 3 recommendations. First, revise the beneficiary settings on my pension account, removing the default family inheritance designation. Second, sign a legal agreement barring the resale of the house for 10 years, notarized and filed with a registrar. Third, appoint a medical and financial proxy, not Eric, but someone I trust, or the firm itself through a trust backup. You can take this one step at a time, she said, but the moment you walk through that door, I could tell you've already started making decisions. My hands trembled as I signed the first document. But it wasn't fear. It was something else. A release. Like stepping out of shoes that had been too tight for too long. By the time I returned home, the sky was darkening. The living room was unlit, except for the faint yellow glow above the kitchen counter. Melissa was tossing a Caesar salad, one of her content bowls, for filming. Ethan was crouched in front of the TV, laser-focused on his new video game. Eric leaned against the fridge, beer in one hand, scrolling his phone with the other. I stepped into the doorway and said, starting this month, I won't be covering your living expenses anymore. Melissa's fork stopped midair. Sorry, what did you just say? I've frozen the secondary credit card. Car insurance is now separate. I canceled the shared grocery membership too. You'll need to start covering your own costs. Eric frowned. Mom, I thought we agreed this was a shared living arrangement. If it's shared, I said, meeting his gaze, then it should go both ways. I've been the only one paying. Melissa let out a sharp, humorless laugh. So now we're moochers. You're seriously being this dramatic, Helen. I said nothing. I walked to the dining table and placed an envelope down. It was sealed copies of the legal documents Naomi and I had signed. If you need confirmation, I said, you can have your lawyer take a look. Ethan muttered from the couch. So this is all about a few video games and sneakers. Really, Grandma? I looked at him gently. It's not about the games or the money. It's about learning that no one gets to live off someone else forever. No one responded. The only sound was the kitchen light flickering when Melissa turned on the range, who'd click like a power circuit snapping off. A few days later, Rosa called me. Have you been online today? She asked. No. Why? Melissa posted a video. Full sob story. She's crying like she's auditioning for something. I opened my tablet. There she was, seated in our living room. The camera carefully angled to capture that soulless gray abstract painting and the trendy throw pillows. We just wanted to be there for her. Melissa sobbed. But she shut us out. I'm just a daughter-in-law, a mother, trying to hold a family together. The comments poured in. Sounds like her MIL's losing it. She's hoarding her retirement money and expects the young ones to pay. I didn't comment. I didn't even get angry. I simply closed the video and flipped the tablet face down on the table. That night, I slept lightly. At around 2 a.m., I went downstairs for water and found Rosa standing at the back door, a bottle of red wine in her hand. "You're still up," she said. I figured. We sat in the kitchen. No overhead light, just the soft glow from the small bulb near the stove. "Why'd she post that video?" I asked. Rosa took a sip and smiled wryly. "It wasn't really about you. She was performing. For her audience. To keep their sympathy. Even bad theater has an audience." I didn't answer. I felt something sharp and cold move through my chest. Not pain, clarity. Rosa set her glass down. "Did you hear about that second-hand bookstore near East Junction?" I shook my head. "The owner's retiring. It's a small place. Cheap rent. I saw a notice on the door and thought maybe you'd like to check it out." I looked at her, saying nothing. "I'm not saying open a shop tomorrow," she added. "But you did always say you wanted to organize your book collection, maybe even turn it into a little gallery someday." I nodded slowly. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the background, like time itself was being gently pulled into place, unfolding a path I'd never dared to imagine. Maybe it was time I tried something just for me. Not to earn anything. Just to prove that even at this age, I still get to choose what kind of life I want to live. It was a gray day. The kind where the clouds hang low like the sky is holding its breath. I was at the dining table flipping through an old recipe book, thinking about making potato soup for dinner. The yellow bulb in the kitchen corner flickered twice unstable voltage. I moved instinctively toward the basement to check the fuse box. Halfway down the stairs, I heard Eric on the phone. "She's holding up better than I expected, but not for long. The paperwork's all ready once she signs. It's done." He paused, then chuckled. "Of course I know she's not stupid. But she's old. Who wants to make a mess of things at this age? Once the house is ours, she can live wherever. An assisted living place would probably be better anyway. At least we won't have to look after her." I froze on the staircase landing, one hand gripping the cold banister. The basement light was off. I stood there in half-darkness, and something sharp and icy began to spread through minute rage, but a kind of piercing clarity, the kind that rises from the bone. Like stepping barefoot on a cement floor at dawn in winter. The pain doesn't blink. I didn't make a sound. I just quietly backed up the stairs, returned to the kitchen, and turned off the kettle that was already hissing. I sat at the table and waited. I wasn't giving them any more room to maneuver. 2 days later, Melissa asked to have a chat. She chose 3 in the afternoon. Ethan was at school. The house was quiet. She brewed rose tea and served it in her pink and white porcelain cups, the set she used when she wanted something. She slid a stack of documents toward me. "This is a property transfer authorization. We've been in touch with a lawyer who can handle the listing, the transfer, and help coordinate your move to a senior community. All perfectly legal." I didn't touch the papers. She went on. "We're not trying to pressure you. We just hope you'll understand that we're really stretched. Ethan's about to start high school, and we're already drowning in loans. You always said family should come first." I finally spoke, my tone calm and low. "Have you ever heard this? You can't live a life that doesn't really belong to you by stealing their resources." She blinked, her smile faltering just a little. I looked her in the eye and continued. "When you moved in, you said it was to be here for me. And now, here you are, asking me to sign away everything I've worked for. You want the house, the pension, my exit plan, and you still expect me to say thank you." Her voice sharpened. "Helen, that's unfair. Eric is your son. We're not strangers." I stood, slowly pushing the papers back toward her. "I've hired a lawyer. Until I sign, that agreement means nothing. And I won't sign. Not now, not ever." Her voice rose. "So you'd throw your own family out over some old house?" I looked at her calmly. "I'm not the one throwing anyone out." Just then, the front door opened. Eric walked in, glanced at us, and didn't even try to look surprised, just annoyed. He dropped his bag, picked up the document stack, and said tightly, "Mom, do you realize what you're doing? You're backing us into a corner." I didn't let him finish. "I should have backed you into a corner a long time ago. Because you've treated me like an ATM, not a mother." Melissa rose to her feet, face tight, lips pursed like she had a mouthful of words but no space to say them. Eric held the papers like they were the last threads of control he had left. His voice cooled to a low threat. "You're tearing this family apart." I looked into his eyes and saw not the child I'd labored 20 hours to bring into the world, but a stranger, postured like he was at a negotiation table. It's not me, I said evenly. It's you. You've never tried to carry the weight of this familiar V, just kept draining what your father and I built. He had no comeback. His jaw tightened. His fingers curled tighter around the document. I turned away, walked into the kitchen, and began peeling potatoes. I didn't look back, but I heard Melissa gathering the papers, slamming a cup against the table hard enough to break it. The door slammed shut behind them, a final thud that sounded like something would never return. That night, I made the potato soup. I added rosemary and black pepper. I ate alone, washed the dishes, swept up the shattered porcelain, and packed the shards into a small box labeled past. I sealed the box and placed it on the highest shelf in the storage closet. It was only then I understood my weaning process had only just begun. That morning, I made pancakes, Ethan's favorite kind, with a dash of orange zest and just the lightest touch of cinnamon. But he didn't come down for breakfast. Melissa said he was having a rough day and attending online classes from his room. Eric sat at the table, scrolling through his phone and sipping coffee. I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal eviction notice, drafted and notarized by Naomi's law firm. This is a legal advisory, I said calmly, settling into my seat and nudging my plate closer. At the beginning of next month, I'll be starting a structural renovation project, moisture control on the second floor, pipe replacements, reinforcement of the staircase beams. He frowned. What does that mean? It means you'll need to move out before then. The house won't be livable during construction, and you won't need to move back in afterward. I'm no longer treating this home as a shared space. He froze, clearly not expecting me to be so direct. Melissa appeared from the kitchen in a bathrobe, face bare and paler than usual. You're just kicking us out. I took a sip of orange juice. Not kicking, cleansing. You should be grateful I gave notice. She let out a bitter laugh. Aren't you afraid people will say you're a cold-hearted old woman, throwing out your own son's family? I stared at her. If you still cared what people think, maybe you should have cared more about what you actually did. I held her gaze. You called me family when you moved in, Zaid. You were here to support me. But the moment you realized you wouldn't get the house, you became the victim. You're not my family, Melissa. You're a parasite feeding off this home. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Her mouth twitched as if to respond, but nothing came out. She turned and stormed upstairs. Footsteps pounding like she'd stepped on a nail. Eric didn't finish his coffee. He slammed the mug down hard. You're tearing this family apart. My voice stayed steady. If this family only works when I bankroll it, stay silent, and let you raid my documents behind my back, then it's not a family. It's a con. He glared at me like he still had more to say, but he stormed out instead. For years, he's barely spoken to me directly. He circles around things saying business is slow, the kids overwhelmed, rent's outrageous, but never once does he ask how to take responsibility. 3 days later, I saw a video on our neighborhood Facebook group. Melissa had posted it. The title read, "When you give everything and still get treated like an outsider." There she was, eyes red, speaking to the camera about how she had quit her job to care for her aging mother-in-law, how she tried to create warmth across 3 generations, and how a stubborn, irrational elder had cruelly thrown them out. She filmed it in my living room. She'd even dragged out the old family photo that she herself had packed away in the garage weeks ago and now used as a sympathy prop. The comment section was flooded. Is she suffering from dementia? In this economy, who still lets a mother-in-law move in? That woman deserves a medal. Bet that house is worth hundreds of thousands. Let's be real, it's always about money. I wasn't planning to respond. But that afternoon, Rosa knocked on my door, tablet in hand, eyes flashing. You seen the video? I nodded. I underestimated her gift for fiction. Rosa opened the screen. I left a comment. Want to hear it? I smiled. What did you write? She cleared her throat and read. Hi, I'm Helen's neighbor and friend. I've been around since her husband's funeral and watched her grieve while housing your entire family, covering every expense. Your husband barely works. You film videos all day and mock her for living in an old house. Even wanted to gut the kitchen for aesthetic flow. Now you're out. You cry victim. Want me to post the receipt for the Gucci bag you bought using Helen's pension funds? I laughed, shaky at first, then deeper. How'd you get her receipts? Rosa raised an eyebrow. Sweetheart, this isn't my first rodeo with a plastic daughter-in-law. Within the week, Melissa's brand deals started falling apart. One by one, Her sponsorships dropped her with identical statements, inconsistent with our core family values. She posted a 24-hour story, eyes swollen like grapes. I gave my whole heart to this family. Fed it to the wolves. I closed the screen, went to my study, and pulled out an old copy of Little Women. The pages were yellowed with age. I'd bought it in Boston during my first real trip alone. On the front page, David had written, "Don't hide your light. That's your name." That night, I dreamed of him building a bookshelf in the sun, smiling at me between hammer strikes. And I thought maybe it's time to start building one of my own. The bookstore sat on the old commercial strip in the heart of town. Its sign was faded white background, blue lettering that read Whispering Pages, tilted slightly like it had been hung by a poetic soul half a century ago and never touched again. It looked like the name of some long-defunct literary society, tucked quietly into a corner of time. When Rosa and I stepped inside, there were only a few rows of bookshelves left and a wooden counter by the front. In the corner, 2 boxes of second-hand books sat unopened. The floor creaked beneath our steps. The air smelled of old paper, wood dust, and the faintest trace of mildew. And yet, it felt familiar, like walking into a room you hadn't known you'd missed until you were standing in it again. Rosa glanced at me. "What do you think?" I didn't answer right away. I walked around the counter, knelt beside an old radiator pipe tucked along the baseboard, and ran my hand over it. "You know," I said, "before David retired, he actually wanted me to apply for a grant and open a little bookshop near home. I didn't go for it. Thought we should keep the money for the family, just in case. He used to say I always put everyone else's needs first. Said I wouldn't even buy a brand new edition of a book I loved." Rosa didn't respond. She just stood behind me, quiet and steady. I looked up at the front window. The sunlight slanted in at just the right angle, landing on one of the unopened boxes. On top sat To Kill a Mockingbird, its corner curling slightly. I reached out and opened it. On the inside cover was a handwritten line. "People generally see what they look for, and hear what they listen for." I suddenly thought of all the things Melissa had said, how she was only doing what's best for the family. Eric, with his tired line about, "You don't understand what it's like out there now." Even Ethan, saying, "Why can't you be more like other grandmas who support their grandkids?" Not one of them had ever asked what I wanted, because they weren't looking, they weren't listening, just projecting. I closed the book and held it to my chest. "I want to rent this place," I said softly. "Not for a paycheck. For myself." Rosa nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that." That evening, I went home and tore through closets and boxes until I found the first book David ever gave May, a hardbound, deep burgundy copy of Little Women. The corners were frayed, the spine worn thin. I finally found it tucked inside the storage basket beneath my old armchair. I curled into that chair and flipped open the front cover. There, still clear, was the line he'd written in his neat hand. "You're not just my wife. You have your own light. I hope you never forget where the switch is." My eyes stung. I traced my finger over that sentence again and again. I had spent most of my life lighting rooms for others. But now, I was finally ready to find the switch for myself. The next day, Rosa came over with 2 hot coffees and a stack of scratch paper. We sat at her kitchen table and started planning the bookstore. "What if we just call it Helen or Rosa Books?" she said with a grin. "Sounds like a brand. Or like 2 old women throwing down a literary gauntlet." I laughed. "Perfect. But I want a tagline underneath it, you never too old to read a book." Her eyes lit up. "And I'll add, or to start the second half of your life." We high-fived, like a pair of anthropologists who had finally escaped the cave and were about to rebuild civilization out of ink and paper. That night, I didn't cook dinner. I sliced some cheese, put out a few grapes, brewed tea. As the sky darkened, I sat in my study, going page by page through a pile of old bills, property forms, even Melissa's leftover influencer content scripts. I packed them all into a paper bag and labeled it "Past." Then I opened a drawer, took out a fresh notebook, and wrote the first line on the first page. "Future starting with a bookstore that finally belongs to me." That morning was unusually quiet. The kind of stillness that feels like a held breath before something breaks. I was sipping coffee in the kitchen, watching the maple tree outside blush into its fall colors, when Rosa sent me a text, just 2 words. "It's boiling." Not long after her now infamous comment, the likes on Rosa's posts started skyrocketing. Then, the internet sleuths showed up. Someone zoomed in on the background of one of Melissa's older vlogs. There it was taped to the side of my Phrygia legal notice from Naomi's firm. Clear as day. Right next to it, partially visible, a printed statement titled Retirement Account Adjustment Notice. A viewer took screenshots and began unraveling the timeline. She claimed this video was filmed during her full-time caregiver phase. But on that day, she was clearly shopping at the mall, bragging about how to use senior assets as smart investments. The viral thread was titled, Devoted Daughter-in-Law, more like Strategic Usurper, and the comments lit up like a match to dry pine. She said she moved in to take care of her MIL. Turns out she just wanted the house. This isn't multi-gen living. This is multi-gen leeching. What on earth did that poor woman do to deserve this? I didn't bother watching whatever clarification Melissa posted. I just noticed her pinned video had quietly vanished. She always believed that if she controlled the lens, she could control the narrative. But this time, the lens turned on her and exposed what she never wanted seen. The scheming, the manipulation, and that barely hidden flicker of panic. That afternoon, Ethan stormed into my house and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the glass. I was on the porch, repotting an old spider plant. He threw his backpack on the couch like it had insulted him personally. "Can you please stop making our family look so pathetic?" he yelled. I didn't answer. Just wiped the dirt from my hands and walked into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. He followed. His eyes were red. "My classmates said my mom's a gold digger." He spat. "They shared that photo of you and said we're all just parasites off you." I set the kettle down and turned to face him. He was still just a boy shaped by all the wrong things. A boy who had once treated me like a human ATM. And now, finally, he was tasting what it meant to be judged not for how you suffer, but for what you've taken. I didn't scold him. I just said quietly, "You're ashamed, because you know they're not entirely wrong." He blinked. "Frozen. Your dad has no stable job. Your mom built a career off pretending to be a devoted daughter-in-law. They've been acting for you, acting for the internet. And you joined the show. But you never once asked me, did I want a role in this drama?" His fists clenched, and his head dropped. I walked past him, opened a cabinet, and pulled out a journal. I placed it gently in front of him. "It's time you started writing your own story, Ethan, not copying your father's." He took the journal and left without another word. Some awakenings only happen after you hit a wall and realize it's not going to move for you. A few days later, Eric showed up, alone, holding a limp bouquet of daisies that looked like they'd been bought on clearance. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I nodded but didn't invite him in. I sat on the porch swing. He sat beside me, fiddling with the plastic wrap around the flowers. "I know we messed up," he said, voice dry and tight. "We were rushing things. We shouldn't have pushed like that. But can't you just forgive us, just once?" I listened, quietly. Let him finish. "We'll move back in," he added. "No more talk about selling the house. Let's just start over. Please." I shook my head slowly. "It's not about the house, Eric." He frowned. "Then what is it?" "It's about how your version of starting over is just a way to go back to the beginning. Back to when you could control me, exploit me, ignore me." I looked at him. "You don't want to change. You just want your position back." His face fell, like I just read the thought he was trying to bury. "I'm not your backdrop anymore," I said. "I'm your mother, not an extension of your ego. Not a bailout plan. Not a walking college fund for your kid." I stood, folded the porch blanket, and placed it neatly on the chair. "You can go now." He didn't argue. He just set the daisies down on the top step and walked down slowly. I didn't pick them up. By evening, the wind had carried them onto the lawn. A few petals had torn off in the rain. They looked like the pieces of myself I'd surrendered over decades finally being returned to the earth. One storm at a time. The day our bookstore officially opened, the sky was unreasonably beautiful sunlight like it had been filtered through an old photograph. Warm, but never harsh. Like the kind of light that holds memories instead of casting shadows. We had refurbished the old blue and white sign above the door, painting it a soft gray with deep green lettering. It read simply, "Helen Your Rosa Books." Beneath it, in cursive script, "Books, coffee or a place to begin again." Out front, we placed a chalkboard easel. Rosa had written on it, "Opening today. Whatever your age. You're welcome to start over." I hadn't expected a crowd. After all, we weren't influencers. There were no grand opening gimmicks or ribbon-cutting ceremonies. But by 10 a.m., people began trickling in. Some came for the 50 off secondhand classics table. Others had seen Rose's announcement in the local Facebook group. A few were students from the nearby community college, arriving in little clusters with tote bags and wide eyes. I stood behind the register, watching it all like I was standing on the edge of a quiet tide. It rolled in slow and steady smelling of books, laughter, and the soft bite of fresh coffee grounds. A local radio journalist stopped by, mic in hand. She smiled at me and asked, "Can I ask you something, Helen? Do you ever feel like it's too late to start a business at this age?" I smiled, glancing out the front window. "I'm 68, I said, and people like to think this is the age to downsize, move into a retirement condo, do jigsaw puzzles, and listen to golden oldies. But I want to say something to every woman who's ever been told to quiet down and settle in if your mind is sharp and your heart is still kicking. It is never too late." She nodded thoughtfully. "What made you finally do it?" I looked at the shelves lining the walls. Because I finally realized I'm not just someone's mom, someone's wife, or someone's emergency fund. I'm me, and that me deserves her own story. The afternoon softened. I was wiping down the glass door when I caught a familiar shadow lingering outside. Ethan, backpack slung over one shoulder. Clutching the journal I gave him like it weighed more than paper ever should. His toes tapped the tiled step, nervous, uncertain. I opened the door. "Come on in," I said quietly. He stepped inside like he wasn't sure he had the right address. "I saw that video of your interview," he said. "Someone in the comments wrote, 'I wish my grandma was as cool as you.'" He looked down at his shoes. "I didn't get it before. Why you changed?" "I think I'm starting to." I smiled gently. "People can change, Ethan, as long as they're willing to take a hard look at who they used to be." He nodded. Then, slowly, he pulled a hard cover from his Baga pristine copy of The Giver. "Could you write something on the inside? I want to start writing. I just don't know how to begin." I took the book, turned to the title page, and wrote, "Write the version of yourself you hope to become, not the one your parents told you to be." He whispered, "Thank you," and walked to a corner shelf, flipping through pages. Silent. I stood still for a moment, my chest unexpectedly light. This kid, maybe he still had a shot. By 6 o'clock, Rosa handed me a mug of coffee. "How are we feeling?" she asked. "Like I'm breathing new air," I said. She patted my shoulder. "You know, your eyes finally don't look like they're scanning for landmines. They look like they're seeing the world again." I smiled. "I want to keep seeing. There's still so much I haven't read." Before we closed shop, I placed Little Women in the display window, front and center. I taped a small note above it, for every woman who finally learned to love herself. I stood in the doorway, watching as the sunset dyed the glass a soft amber. This house, this store, this life. At last, they were still mine. The day Naomi came by with the finalized will. I wore an ivory sweater. Rosa insisted I pair it with the ruby brooch, David's last birthday gift to me before he passed. We sat at the oak kitchen table, the same one that had seen decades of breakfasts and school forms and late-night bills. Naomi placed the documents in front of me, flipping pages with practiced ease. "Once these are filed," she said, "the house, the accounts, the pension, everything follows your instruction. No one can contest it." I nodded, signing each page with steady hands, then folded them back into the folder she brought. I didn't leave the house to Eric, and I didn't set up an education trust for Ethan. My entire estate would go to two places, the local public library fund and our bookstore. "I just want them to understand," I told Naomi. "This isn't revenge. This is me placing my life's work into the hands of people who actually value it." She smiled as she closed the folder. "That's the kind of freedom no one gives you. You take it for yourself." We'd converted a portion of the old living room into what we called the weekend reading room. Every weekend, retired teachers, volunteers, and neighborhood parents brought children and teens to read, discuss, write. Sometimes we'd host book swaps. On busy Saturdays, kids spilled out onto the front steps with cocoa and comic books. The same coffee table Melissa once staged for her minimalist modern vlogs now held picture books, handmade bookmarks, and paper cups with crayon names. Now that was what space meant. Ethan came once. He didn't say much, just sat in the corner flipping pages, glancing out at the maple tree like he was looking for something. I didn't bother him. Some reconciliations unfold in silence. At dusk, Rosa brought 2 mugs of hot rooibos tea. We settled into the porch chairs, a soft wool blanket across our knees. and a lazy kitten curled at our feet gifted by a neighbor's kid who said the cat seemed to belong in the bookstore. You know what my favorite part of this house is? Rosa asked. I shook my head. This porch, she said with a grin. You sit here, and no matter the weather, you can always see where you came from and hold your ground where you are. I nodded slowly. I used to wonder what home really meant, but now I think I know. It's not about who gets to live there. It's about where you feel grounded. She laughed. God, you sound like a podcast guest. I laughed too. Funny you say that I am going on a podcast. The episode was part of a series by the community library called Second Chapters. New Lives, New Women. The host, a warm-voiced author around my age, asked me one last question. Helen, if you could say one thing to yourself 3 years ago, what would it be? I paused, then leaned into the mic and said, they all thought I was old, easy to manage, easy to silence. They thought I feared loneliness, feared being dependent, feared being pushed out of my own life. But they forgot I was once the woman who ran a whole library. I balanced our books for 2 decades. I was the mom who sat up through every fever, who stitched together meals from nothing, who never walked away. I smiled, just slightly. I'm Helen Monroe. And now, the house is mine and so is the life. The host nodded. Her eyes lit up. I think that line's going to live inside a lot of people for a long time. That night, walking home beneath a sky brushed soft blue, I passed the bookstore. The window was still aglow. A teenage girl sat by the glass, scribbling in a notebook. A cup of tea rested beside her. I didn't go in. I just pulled my coat tighter around me and stepped through my own front door. Down the hallway, a crimson leaf from the maple tree had fallen on the wood floor. It made a clean, crisp tap when I stepped beside it. I paused at the doorway and whispered, "Good night, home."